Good morning. Welcome to my January 2 live stream. I assume that I will mostly be answering questions related to PhD applications, since that's what tends to be in these. But if anyone wants to talk about other things generally related to academia and grad school, I'm happy to do that as well. So as usual, I'm just gonna jump right in and start answering questions because I see there's a handful of people here, and yeah, I will say hello occasionally as more people come in. So first of all, a couple of people have just said thank you in the comments, which is very nice. You're welcome. I'm just glad that the videos that I've been doing and the advice that I've been giving has been helpful for people. And oh, hello from Kazakhstan. Wonderful. So I will answer this question briefly. So the question is whether I've gotten to hood any of my PhD advisees yet. And the answer is no. I've actually only had one student graduate, so I've only been a professor for 6 years. So I've only had one student graduate, and he did not. This was in December of 2020, and so he did not get to walk. I did not get to hood him, but he did come by and say hello, and I gave him a plastic sword that his co-advisor and I had gotten for him. And I mean, funny, fun memories of my mentees. I will just say that my mentees are all wonderful, and I love them dearly. All right. Here's a question. What should I wear to my site visit that is 6 hours long and followed by a dinner? I've gotten questions. They didn't appear to be on YouTube because I couldn't find them again. So maybe it was on TikTok, but I saw a couple of questions about what should you wear to site visits. And I guess I didn't really address this in my video about site visits. Maybe because I don't really have a good answer. I mean, I guess business casual, I guess. I don't really I seriously cannot remember a single thing that anyone at any of our open houses wore. I guess if someone had worn something incredibly inappropriate, it would have stuck out to me, but I don't think I would have paid attention to whether someone was wearing jeans or a suit. So I don't think anyone ever wore a suit. I guess the answer is business casual. But honestly, if you were wearing jeans, I would not take notice of that, but probably to be on the safe side, that's what I would say. I'm so for those of you who are just saying my advice has helped, I'm so glad, and you're very welcome. A question about preparing a research proposal. Oh, I think maybe you didn't finish writing. Well, okay, maybe the question is just how do you prepare a research proposal? I'm not sure if you mean like a research proposal in general or the particular.
I don't know what you mean by.
Sorry, my watch. I don't know if you mean a research proposal like in general or if you mean for PhD applications. And unfortunately, here's where my expertise is limited. My understanding is that formal research proposals as part of PhD applications are very common in countries outside the US and in particular in Europe. And I just don't actually know what those are supposed to look like. But there are a couple of creators on YouTube who I've seen talk about that. Also, for those of you who have come in, hello. Feel free to ask questions. I will get to them in order. And if it seems like I've skipped you, feel free to ask again because sometimes it scrolls weird and I miss things that are in the chat. Found out that many universities are not taking PhDs for spring admissions. Is this the case for all universities? I'm sure it's not the case for all universities, but in my experience, most universities do admissions once a year. Ours does. So at least my program does. So I guess what I can say is it is incredibly common for PhD programs to have new cohorts of students once a year, which is in the fall. And so if you have missed deadlines I mean, it's worth asking. You never know. But it's very common, for there to be one deadline a year for fall admission. Um, it is indeed. Someone said good morning. It is indeed good morning for my time zone. It is 10 a.m. here. I use Eastern Standard Time in the thumbnails for my videos because I'm in Mountain Time and like no one knows what it is. It's like the lost time zone in the United States. um, Universities are asking for a grade B in master's degree for PhD application. What is a grade B in terms of percentage? So I think probably what that means, if you're looking at universities in the US and they say a B average, that typically means so in the US, a B is 80% and above, or maybe like that could like low in the 80s might be considered like a B minus. In GPA, that translates to a 3.0. So I don't know how that might translate to grading scales, but maybe 80% is the answer you're looking for. When you complete a PhD, especially in STEM, is it difficult to enter the industry with perspective of change in the work environment? Do you get conditioned to perform only research? I mean, I'm not sure I can answer that question about conditioning, but I guess so most jobs that a PhD prepares you for are about research, whether that's academic research or industry research. I mean, I'm sure there are other kinds of jobs that you can get, but if you're talking about, going going to work in a lab or the medical field, or like probably if you have a PhD, you're doing R&D kind of work or research kind of work, right? Um, so I don't really know how to answer this question, but I mean, I don't know how you get conditioned to like only do. I mean, people do whatever jobs they get and want to do, I guess. Let's see. Sorry, I have trouble keeping track of stuff in the chat sometimes. Oh, I'm glad someone brought up this question early so that I can answer it and help folks, because this is a very common question. So the question is, I applied for my PhD, but I haven't received a decision yet. It's been 2 months. Normal. In fact, I would say if you've not received a decision yet, that is a good sign. So it's been 2 months. That's pretty typical at this point. So a lot of applications are due like early December. Like our deadline was December 1st. It takes a while to review PhD applications, and also keep in mind that a lot of people were on break, like holidays, like not working for a while in December, because that's how this timing just works out. So if you have not heard anything yet on your PhD applications, you are not alone. And like I said, that's kind of a good sign, because like desk rejections tend to be the first thing that go out. So like the obvious rejections are kind of the easiest thing to do. And so it could actually even be a good sign if you haven't heard yet, but it's totally, totally normal that you haven't heard yet. And it might be considerably longer. I mean, if you had to ask me to sort of guess based on my experience and also just what I've heard from other places, probably the latest that decisions start to go out if you were applying, like in December, is like March. Let's see. Paras, I'm afraid I don't understand the question. You applied to a PhD. Sorry, I don't understand your question. You might want to ask that one again. Something about processors, but I'm not sure what that means. Someone who wants to pursue their PhD in chemistry in New Zealand, please give advice. I don't have any advice related to chemistry PhDs in specific because I don't know anything about them. I also don't know anything about New Zealand. So I'm afraid all of the advice that I give you is just the sort of general advice that's been in my videos. But particularly because you're applying outside the US, I would highly, highly recommend that you talk to people about PhDs in New Zealand, because some of the advice that I've given might not apply. You have a virtual recruitment visit meeting. What should you expect? So first of all, for those of you who have like interviews, site visits, open houses, or whatever coming up, I have a video about that. I hope it's helpful. Actually, there's 2 videos because one's about interviews, talking to specific like potential advisors in general, and one specifically about site visits. So if you haven't seen those, you would find them useful. I guess, what to expect. You said it includes interviews with faculty. Like, what you should expect is both to, be interviewed, and to be courted. It's a weird dynamic, these like PhD admissions visits, open houses, interviews, because if it's happening before you've been admitted, then it's both an interview and a kind of courting, in that like they want the students they make offers to come. So it's unusual for there to be 2 separate things, like an interview and then also a sort of like admitted students thing. So maybe some places with lots of money do that. So that means that you'll also be getting like a lot of information, and you might have an opportunity to talk to current students. And so you should use it as an opportunity to ask questions and find out more as well. What are post-interview acceptance rates? I have absolutely no idea and would expect that this varies drastically from program to program. You seem great. Thank you. Switched a PhD app from biomed to mechanical engineering because you found a professor in that department. How much of a difference does the department make? My guess is that this would vary greatly depending on your discipline and what the departments are and how things work. A similar question, like, I actually have no idea how different mechanical versus biomedical engineering are, but I could imagine an analog being like computer science versus information science, which is a question that I get a lot. And for that, it actually probably doesn't matter that much. What matters is the research that you're doing and where you're publishing and that sort of thing, right? So you want to find out if like that department if you'll be able to publish in the discipline with the norms that represent what you want to do afterwards, if that makes sense. So it could very well be that the specific research and advisor matters more than the department. But someone in your discipline could probably answer that better than me. When do fall notifications usually go out? So like I said, varies a lot, but probably anytime between now and March. And like now and like the end of March is that's just a sort of guess. Is it okay to reach out to the director of graduate admissions to seek status timeline about interviews and applications? Yes. Yes, but so yes, you can always ask for information. And in theory, a question like that should not be, annoying unless you do it in an annoying way or you ask a lot or something like that. But a question I might wonder is like, why do you need to know? Because if you have a specific reason that you need to know, that's helpful. So like, for example, if you've been admitted into a program and you haven't heard back from other programs, that might be a good reason for you to check on the status. But if it's just that you're impatient, and I'm sorry, not to imply that someone's impatient, but like just because you want to know, like everyone wants to know, trust me. And like, we know that everyone wants to know, and people are trying to get decisions out as fast as possible, but it just takes time. The odds are, if you haven't heard yet, that it's still in process. So The other thing is that you might not even get an answer because they might not know how long it's going to take. Like if someone emailed, and I would be the person, like my email address is all over our like application web pages. So like if someone emailed me and said, I would like to know my application status and when decisions will be out, my response would be, your application is under review and we will have decisions to you as soon as we can, because there's just no further information than that. But if someone said, and actually in theory this shouldn't happen because programs are not supposed to do, at least in the US, they're really, really not supposed to do this. But if someone emailed me and said, I have an offer somewhere that they've told me that I have to give them a decision in the next 2 weeks, can I please know if my application is being strongly considered? Like there might be something that I could do. I couldn't tell them, oh, you're being accepted, but I might be able to like push it along and tell them that they're being rejected, maybe. But basically, it's hard to know. If someone has poor grades in a bachelor's and master's, does it drastically acceptance for a PhD program? So, my let me take a drink. My answer to any question about how much does X matter, whether X is grades or test scores or research experience or where you went to undergrad or whatever, my answer to any question like that is there are lots of parts of your application. Some of them make it worse, some of them make it better, and it should be considered holistically. And there's very, very, very few things that are like auto reject, right? And so the question, and also different programs weigh different things differently. Even different faculty who are looking at potential advisees weigh different things differently. And whether you have something that makes up for a weakness, it's there's just no way to answer the question of how much does X matter. And even I have, like, I would tell you, for example, that I think GRE scores don't matter at all, but that's just my personal opinion. And for other programs and other faculty, that's not the case. So it's really hard to answer that kind of question, except to say that people get into PhD programs with not great grades all the time. And there's probably other things that are really strong about their application. All right. If we don't hear back from a program after 6 weeks, Umberto, I'm gonna assume that you heard the answer that I just gave, and that answers your question about reaching out to someone. But the person that you should reach out to, if you need to, based on the discussion that we just had, would be whoever is listed as like the contact person about applications. And there's probably someone on, they've got a website that explains how to apply, and somewhere on there there's someone that you should contact. I'm gonna skip the question that's irrelevant to this conversation. Do people tend to invite more applicants to the PhD interview because they're virtual now? That's an interesting question. That is possible. Is it true in our program? Maybe. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head, like thinking about numbers, but I can see why that would be true and why that could be good. And the reason that it could be true is because it costs money to fly people out. Like it just does. And there's some finite amount of money that a department can spend on flying people out and putting them up at a hotel room and that sort of thing. And so it is entirely possible that they've decided to be a little more inclusive with virtual visits because they can be. But of course, I don't know for sure. Applied for PhD and invited to a number of interviews hosted by individual professors. What is the difference between an interview and a site visit? Well, I guess a site visit is like, so a site visit or open house or group, and like a thing where a number of applicants who in theory are on some kind of short list in the before times often were visiting the university and that sort of thing. So that's what that is. And it's a little bit of an extended interview. Sometimes those don't happen until after everyone is admitted. And that's sort of like a make a decision about whether to come here. But that's a little bit different. And those happen both ways. If you're just talking to an individual professor, that could mean one of two things. It could mean that that program doesn't do a group visit, whether that's virtual or in person. It could mean that. It could also mean that this is something that's happening before that. Sometimes in making decisions about who to invite to those, that involves sort of, talking to people before that. So it's, it's different. It's difficult to know. It's completely, so yes, it is completely understandable that a lot of people are anxious. That's kind of why I'm doing this right now at this time. I don't know how much I can help with people's anxiety, but if you have different project topics in a bachelor's and a master's dissertation, is it possible to switch to a different topic, or is a master's dissertation the bridge to a PhD? So, what's most common is that you do your master's degree and then you do your PhD somewhere else. And so, with that in mind, it's probably more likely that your research will switch a little bit because it'll be depending on who you're working with and what program you're in and that sort of thing. If you're planning to stay, for a PhD at the same place, then it might be more likely that you could continue the kind of work that you're doing. But if you don't want to, then that answers that question, right? Like, my hope would be that no one would go into a PhD program knowing that they would be forced to do research that they don't want to do. So some people continue similar work to what they did in their master's, and some people do something completely different. For an interview weekend, if you're asked about weaknesses, is it best to relate to academia, or should it be work related? I just think this is such a stupid question, or at least phrased like that. I hope that someone's not interviewing you and like literally say, "Tell me about your greatest weakness." Like, what a useless question. I think I talked about this a little bit in my video about interviews. Because I cautioned against giving disingenuous answers to that question. Like, don't say like, I just work too hard, or that's such a cliche. If someone's asking you about your weaknesses, I would hope that the reason for it would lead them to ask it in a way that, like, the reason someone should ask about your weaknesses is because they want to know whether how you could be supported, and whether like there is support for the kinds of things that you need. And so I could imagine, a question that's like, what are the things that you are most eager to improve upon, and and then you can give a truthful answer, like you haven't had the opportunity to do X kind of research yet, but you really want to learn how to do it, something like that. I'm not. That's such a weird question. I can't even remember completely what the advice I gave in that video was. But I guess think about. I guess the things that you want to improve upon might be something that could help you think about that question. What level of clarity is expected for a research proposal? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, a formal research proposal is something that is common in countries outside the US, and in particular in Europe and in the UK in particular. I'm so sorry, but I know nothing about that. I think I've seen a couple of other creators on YouTube who have spoken more directly to the EU PhD system. So there might be videos out about that somewhere, but I just have absolutely no idea because I've never even read one of those. Has the number of applicants increased or decreased for this cycle? I have no idea. Me telling you for my program is not useful because our applications increase every year. So my PhD program is new. It only launched in 2016. And so, in 2016, we got like barely any applications because nobody knew that we existed. So we've gotten more applications every year. So I just can't answer that question. No idea what to expect for your site visit. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about site visits. And again, I have a video about this that I made so long ago that I barely remember what is in it. So I would imagine that plane. I would imagine there's more in that video that I'm gonna say right now, just off the top of my head. And again, so this is based on my experience, which is based on running a single one of these, because I didn't even go on them when I was applying for PhD programs. So I think that so if you're meeting with individual faculty, they'll probably tell you who they are ahead of time, which means that you can, as you said, notes, you looked up potential advisors, et cetera, so you can look up the people that you're meeting with. Just because you're meeting with someone doesn't necessarily mean that they are a potential advisor. And also you should know whether you think they're a potential, like, if it's not someone that you think would be a good advisor for you anyway, then but you can usually find connections for your research with someone. You'll also probably meet other students. So let me give you two pieces of it. And again, part of it's about them trying to make the program seem appealing so that if you are admitted, you go there. And so you should feel comfortable asking questions and that sort of thing. And I'll give you two pieces of advice. One is take every opportunity that you can and really appreciate the opportunity to interact with current students, because you can get so much important information about a program from current students. And like, how's the culture? Like, do they seem happy? That would be like the number one thing that I would want to know. And also interacting with other applicants who are there. So this is the benefit of there being these group things, because the people who are all invited to this site visit, not all of them are going to go to that school, even if they all are admitted, but you'll all be in the same, but if you're going to site visit, people are probably getting in somewhere. And so you're all in the same field. Like, these are the people that you're going to see at conferences for the next 6 years. Make some friends. And one more piece of advice, and I would like to think that this goes without saying, but unfortunately, I know for a fact that this does not go without saying, and this is to be kind to everyone, including admin staff. Do not be rude to the person who is like booking your flights. Like, they interact with faculty. If someone is rude to our admin assistant, that reflects very badly on that person. Again, I would hope this goes without saying, but you'd be surprised. Can a student email multiple professors in the same department about funding opportunities, or should you take some days off between contacting others? So my answer to this question depends a little bit on like, what is the funding model in that department? So make sure you know the answer to that. Because like, if this is a program where students are admitted under specific grant projects, for example, like this is common in UK universities where like students are like applying to a particular PhD funded position. So if that's the case, then I guess it makes total sense to be talking to different people specifically about funding. But at a lot of places, like you're not applying to a particular project. Like, you might be working with a faculty member who has funding or not, but it's just a little bit different. So let me actually answer this question in the more general, which is, should you email multiple like potential advisors at once? And I mostly think that's probably fine. It wouldn't have bothered me. In fact, I almost always tell people to also email other people. And so if you know who all those people ahead of time are, I don't think there's a problem with emailing multiple people at once. You've done your master's. I mean, you had to make a film at the end. What to do if someone's asking for a dissertation. So if the issue is like, there is a place on the application form where I have to upload a PDF. If that's the case, you might want to like email them and say, hey, for my master's degree, we didn't do a dissertation. I did this. How would you like me to submit that? That would be my answer to that. Like, ask someone. And if it's just like, is it okay to still apply? I mean, I guess you could also ask someone that, but like probably. How much of a percentage is required in a master's degree for applying to PhD programs in Scandinavian universities? I do not know the answer to that question. Have an interview day coming up where you're chatting with 8 professors for 15 minutes each. How should you prepare? Oh, gosh, wow, does that sound exhausting? First of all, sorry, that sounds awful. You should take more time thinking about your meetings with people who might potentially be your advisors based on like research fit. And spend a little bit more time on them. But in general, make sure that you know generally what their research area is. You don't need to like read the most 5 recent papers from everyone you're like, that's completely ridiculous if anyone expected that of you. You should generally know what they do, and you should, with some degree of like, how much do you care about, like, how much is this person potentially your advisor? And those who are potentially your advisors, you should be able to think about like how your research connects to what they do. For those who, are farther away, that's not as important. And you should think of questions that you have. They may, it's a common thing to say, do you have any questions for me? And if you don't, that's totally fine. But if you do, that's something that you can think about ahead of time. Have a final interview in which you're required to give a short presentation. Do you have any advice for the introduction of yourself? I mean, probably like, they want to know who you are, what your educational background is, what kinds of research stuff you've already done, probably, and what you want to do. Like, that's probably it. Yeah, like, if in a PhD interview they say, tell me a little bit about yourself, probably the most important questions you can sort of like answers you can slip into that is like, what do you want to do and why do you want to get a PhD? Left medical school and love teaching in undergrad, but it feels statistically unlikely to become a professor. Is the question whether you can become a medical school? No, an undergrad. Okay. Well, the question is, okay. So if you want to teach undergrads, there are some undergraduate teaching positions that do not require a PhD. Community colleges, some instructor positions, even at big research universities. So you could consider getting a master's degree. It might be enough to teach undergrads. And then the question is like, do you want a PhD? And then it's like, do you want to do research as well in addition to teaching? And the thing about statistically unlikely, that vastly changes based on your field. And I'm assuming, if you're thinking of teaching undergrads and you were interested in medical school, that's like biology or something like that. And STEM in general tends to have a better job market than some other fields, but I don't really know that much about like medical related fields specifically. Applying to 9 universities and seems like acceptance letters will come at different times. Is there a general date till which you need to respond? You'd like to wait until you all arrive before you before you decide? Excellent question. So I only know how this works in the United States. And I also don't know if what I'm about to describe actually is every single PhD program or not. But there is some agreement between universities in the United States that they cannot require applicants to provide decisions sooner than April 15th. April 15th is like the magic date. My understanding is that something actually governs. I should look into this because I get this question all the time. I just know that this is the case, but I don't know what actually governs it. Like if there's like, it could be like the Council of Graduate Schools in the US. I have no idea. But for many schools, that is the date. And they're not supposed to ask you to make a decision before that date. So what that means is you can wait and get all your decisions and then decide. And I hope that that's the case because that is the fair way for it to work. And that's probably what will happen. If a program admits you and requires you to agree by X date, there are a couple of things that you can consider. And this is how it works for job hunting as well. A, you can contact other schools that you haven't heard from yet and say, a program I have been accepted to is requiring me to give a decision by X date. Can you please let me know the status of my application and when I might get an answer? And another thing that you can do is email the program that you were accepted to and say, would it be possible for me to get more time? Again, I hope you don't have to do this, but those are things that you could do if you wound up in that situation. Do you need to have confirmation from a supervisor to apply? Oh, scrolled away from the question. Sorry. Oh, there's so many questions. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Do you have to have confirmation from a supervisor to apply for a PhD in the US? Do universities provide PhD scholarships? Okay. You probably do not need confirmation from a supervisor, but my understanding is that this is slightly different in some fields. It could be, so you should ask someone in your discipline what they think the norm is here. I know that it will not keep you from applying. But if you're concerned about like application fees and that sort of thing, it would certainly be good for you to know like if there's not a point in applying to X place. But you probably should not have to have, because you can't really get confirmation from you can't, like most places, even if admission is highly tied to whether a particular advisor wants a student, they still don't get to decide all by themselves. People still have to apply to the program. And so in that way, there's not really, like, you're not going to probably, I mean, again, it's possible that some things work differently that I'm not familiar with, but it seems unlikely that you would email a prospective advisor and they would say, yes, if you apply, you will be accepted. That would be very unusual. The thing about scholarships, you should certainly look into the funding model for the places that you're applying. I have a video on PhD funding models in the US that might be useful, but a large number of programs, particularly but not exclusively in STEM, are funded, which means your tuition is waived and you're getting a stipend because you are working as a teaching assistant or a research assistant. And so, that I assume that's the kind of thing that you mean by scholarship, but you should, you can find out about the funding model for the programs that you're considering. Do industries have postdoc positions, or are these positions limited to universities? I mean, I'm pretty sure a postdoc position in industry is called a job. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I'm not understanding the question, but like the reason that a postdoc at a university is a postdoc because you're not a student anymore, but you're also not a faculty member, so it's this sort of in between thing. But industry just has people who work there, so I'm not sure what I mean, I'm sure they have like jobs where someone who just got their PhD gets a short-term, 2-year contract or something, but I still think that's just like a job. What is a practice-based PhD? I do not know. I have not heard that. If that's a term of art, I haven't heard it before, so I'm not sure what that means. Oh Oh, good. Someone says I think they made the right decision. Excellent. Is it good to submit research proposal in advance to your supervisor even before applying to the university? Again, I'm afraid, in terms of like formal research proposals as part of applications that are common especially outside the US, I just don't know anything about how those work, unfortunately. And I have and if you're talking about just like reaching out to prospective advisors before you apply, I have a video about that. So, because I'm not totally sure what you're asking, but that it might be helpful. Someone is giving me a bunch of statistics and asking if it's enough to get a PhD. I'm afraid I just cannot answer that question. Applied for a PhD in physics and you don't have solid research experience. For your statement of purpose, but mention a few areas of research and explain software skills. Where can you get PhD vacancies? Oh, sorry, wait. Sorry, two different questions. Wait. So don't have research for your statement of purpose, but mention that you helped a PhD student in computational research work. Will you stand a chance of getting admitted? So it sounds like you handled your statement of purpose perfectly well. I'm afraid I can't answer any questions about whether anyone can get admitted based on anything about you in particular. And as I said a little bit earlier, like anything you asked me about, like, do I have a chance because of X, where X is GPA, research experience, test scores, anything. That's not a question that I can answer, unfortunately, except to tell you that there's very few deal breakers. Strengths in an application can always make up for weaknesses. Where can you get PhD vacancies in media and communication studies? So when you say PhD vacancies, if you are thinking about programs outside the US and like where, especially in the UK where you apply to like a particular funded PhD position, that is a specific thing. And I don't really know the answer to that question. I occasionally see these things come across listservs. If you're talking about like where do you find PhD programs in that area, Google, Google plus asking people. So if you're considering a PhD in that field, I'm guessing that you might be connected to people who are, professors from your undergrad or that sort of thing, and so you might also ask. There are often directories of PhD programs in specific fields, though. Can someone without a STEM background but degrees in library studies be accepted for my program, which is an iSchool? Yes. Though I will say that so yes, but I would say that if people who are interested in library studies are applying for our program, they should be aware that no one in our department does library studies. But if you are someone who did library studies and now wants to do stuff that looks like what's happening in my department, then absolutely. There doesn't have to my PhD student who's about to graduate this semester, and has done amazingly well, has 2 English degrees and 0 STEM or computer science background before she came into the program. And now she's like applying for jobs in computer science departments. So no, you don't need any particular background. And then Franklin also asked, should you apply for a master's? I mean, again, I can't really answer this question, but a thing that you could do is apply to both. And then if you don't get into PhD programs, you can consider a master's program. How to avoid gradcafe? Don't go there. So yeah, I mean, I tell people sometimes when they ask me for advice on like not being as anxious, I'm like, maybe you should stay off of gradcafe. I mean, people manage their anxiety differently, and for some people, it might be helpful to spend a lot of time trying to analyze whether other people are hearing back from programs, but it just sounds to me like that's gonna be bad for you. So I mean, I don't know, like maybe it's possible to like block it on your computer or something. I'm not sure. What's the best way to ask for funding opportunities from a committee? Have you been accepted yet? Because if you haven't been accepted yet, so I'm assuming you've already applied. Okay, so you've already applied and now you're waiting for a decision and maybe you're going to be interviewed or something. So if you haven't been accepted yet, then funding isn't super relevant. And if you don't get funding, you cannot go there. Or, consider like how that stacks up against other places that you're applying, and not getting funding is a very good reason to not go to a particular program. So, but once you've been admitted, then you absolutely should ask about what funding in that department. I mean, okay. So after you get admitted, you should definitely ask about funding. Before you get admitted, asking what funding looks like in that department is a totally reasonable question, though. Master's degree and graduated in 2019, took a gap and don't have research experience those 2 years. Can you get admitted into a PhD program? Yes. I mean, obviously can't tell you like whether you will or not, but is that a reason to not be admitted into a PhD program? Absolutely not. During a 2-day interview, the schedule indicated you're meeting with many professors that weren't indicated in your SOP. What should you expect? And do you need to know about the research very well? So I've touched on this a little bit, but let me be a little bit more specific in answering that question. So it's common that you might meet with professors who you didn't mention in your statement of purpose. And there are 2 reasons that might happen. One is like, there's only so many meeting slots, and so for example, like I will just come out and tell you that I was one of the more mentioned people in statements of purpose in our department. And I obviously can't advise everyone. So, it's possible that like people who, mentioned other people as well might not meet with me, because there's only so many hours in the day, kind of thing. Like, does that make sense? Like, it might not be evenly distributed among faculty. And so if you're putting together a grid of meetings, you might end up meeting with someone who you didn't mention because just of how the numbers work out. So it could be, and there are lots of reasons to talk to different people in the department, even if they're not going to be your advisor. Like you can ask questions about the department. They can weigh in on, how much they like you, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with whether they're going to, because you're only going to have one advisor. So if you have 5 meetings, they don't all need to be a potential advisor. Okay, so it could just mean that you're meeting with them and there's not a potential advising relationship. And in that case, you should know generally what they're, spend 10 minutes on their website. You don't need to go read their most recent 5 papers, but like know what they do, so that, because it's nice if you've done your research. But there's also a possibility that there's someone who you didn't mention in your statement of purpose who might actually be a potential advisor for you. And there are a number of reasons for that. It could be that maybe you didn't think of a connection, but they saw it, or someone else saw it. Or it could be that they're doing stuff that you don't know that they're doing. Because I mean, this is one of the things about sort of the lag in academic work, right? Like people don't know what I'm doing right this minute because I haven't published on it yet because I'm doing it, right? And so that's a possibility as well. So, but my answer is still kind of the same. Like you should think about whether maybe there's a connection, but it's fine if there's not. And B, you might be about to find out about it. They might tell you what the connection is. I saw a research position that said position 70%. So you want to know about what that is. Ooh, I'm afraid I have no idea what that means. I'm sorry. How can international students fund their PhDs? Can you please talk about the possibilities? So I'm afraid that so in my experience, so this is what's at my university and many other universities that I'm familiar with, international students have the same funding opportunity as domestic students. It's the same. You can be funded as a teaching assistant, you can be funded as a research assistant. And that's true for international students in our department. There is no difference. Sometimes there are particular types of grants that international students can't work on. haven't seen one, but I understand they exist. There are some kinds of fellowships that they're not eligible for, like some kinds of things from the National Science Foundation, for example. But like the baseline general funding is the same. So you don't have to assume that you have to do something different. Now, that might be the case sometimes for certain types of funding. Or if it's not a funded program, and the question is like, well, I can't get student loans from the US government the way that domestic students are, like, that's true. But I'm afraid that I don't actually know like what what mechanisms there are to take student loans for students in other countries. I just don't know the answer to that. Can I suggest some projects of research before a PhD? No, not really. I mean, it depends on what your field is and what kind of thing you want to do, etc. I have a video, and the title is something like, "You've been rejected, now what?" And it's a video about things that you might do to improve your application if you're rejected from PhD programs. And there's a little bit in there about like ways that you might consider seeking out more research experience if you think that was the main problem. And some of those are like, potentially reaching out to faculty to see if they, I mean, I'm always reluctant to suggest that people do unpaid work. And this would often be unpaid, but it is possible, that you might be able to work with someone. But you also might consider, like, I don't know, writing blog posts about your area of interest. Like, I personally would find that cool. And beyond that, I can't really be more specific without knowing more. And probably wouldn't be able to help anyway for a particular discipline. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. An applicant who's interested in ICT for D, social computing, computational social science, applied for a PhD in CS and not info. Is your application likely to be rejected? No. No, I can't see why that would be a reason for your application to be rejected. It depends on the program, of course. The question is, if you applied for a PhD in a computer science department and these are the things that you want to do, are there faculty doing those things? And that shouldn't be any different based on whether it's a CS or an info department. And so that, that would be my question. Oh my gosh, there's so many questions. Okay. Can someone get admitted into a university as a PhD student by applying without contacting a professor? Yes. Yes, you can. I think that in some fields, the norm is stronger than it is in mine to reach out to people ahead of time. But I have never heard anyone say that like it's an auto reject if you haven't I've never heard that before. Given the April 15th deadline, so this is what I was explaining before. By April 15th deadline, I mean that's the deadline for students to make the April 15th deadline. That means that programs cannot require students to make a decision earlier than that. And so often programs will make that the deadline for them to make a decision because it can't be earlier than that. But I assume they could probably make it later if they wanted to. But you're asking, no, so it doesn't mean that they're unable to make so either I'm misunderstanding your question or you might be misunderstanding this. That's not when they make decisions. That's when you make decisions. So yes, there are admits going out now, which is great. The sooner the better. They just can't require you to make a decision before April 15th in the US. Someone got into a funded program at University of Wisconsin or in Wisconsin. Excellent. Maybe, is it Marquette? I'm just kidding. I just know people there. Congratulations. When usually do departments start reviewing the application material after the deadline? I mean, I assume this varies. I mean, technically we started reviewing ours the day after the deadline. But when I say review, like it took like 2 weeks to like put everything into a spreadsheet and assign people to review that. Like there's a lot, so a lot of sort of like upfront work. And then, there were the holidays after that. And so people were reviewing stuff out over the holidays. And so unfortunately, there's not really any way to know the answer to that question. How should you prepare for the first meeting with your advisor? Should it be more like laying the terms down or taking leads from me? Okay, so I guess my answer to this is a little bit of both, with the caveat that the way that the way you've worded this, like the advisee laying down the terms, and now I'm imagining like my advisee coming into my office for the first time and being like, here are the terms of our, like, that would be weird. I assume you don't quite mean it like that though. But I think, how should you prepare? I mean, I don't know that there's like how do you prepare? I mean, I'm trying to think back to like first conversations I've had with advice. So, once a student is admitted and they've decided to come and I'm going to be their advisor, probably I'll talk to them soon after that. And the main thing that we would talk about is me saying, what questions do you have for me? And then me answering them. So I guess the thing that you would need to prepare is knowing what those questions are. And probably also a conversation about like, now that you know you're coming here and you're working with me, what do you want to do? They might not have an answer for that yet. I also tell my advisees to not think about it until fall. But like, yeah, so those two things, questions, and like, now that you know this is going to be your advisor, like, what are you excited about? I guess, different people have super different advising styles though. But let me also add, like, if there's something that they need to know about how to best support you, that would also be a good thing to talk about early on. How important is it for your potential advisors to personally know your letter writers? It is not important at all. In fact, I've never even considered that question before. I mean, I guess there might be some cases where, like, if someone does happen to personally know someone, maybe that would make them more inclined to like really super believe what they're saying. But that has never influenced how I read a letter, really. Is it feasible for design students who don't have a perfect GPA to be accepted to top universities? Yes, it is feasible for anyone who doesn't have a perfect GPA to be accepted to a top university. But okay, this is not any kind of like rag on this question asker, because this is so common. So like you mentioned, like Ivy League, like top universities and Ivy League level, and like I just, like, while I have this opportunity for the 74 of you here, I just want to encourage you all to not be too obsessed with like the name recognition, prestige, elitism, like, of a university in making decisions about PhD programs. I hear so much from people where I'm reading between the lines and thinking that they might, for example, decide to go to an Ivy where it's an objective, it's like it's clearly it's clearly a worse choice on every other metric except for the name of the university, like how much you like the potential advisor and what kinds of research you're going to do, and and how the culture is. It's like there are just so many things that are so important to having a good PhD experience, and it would be better for you to be able to do research that you love and are excited about and have amazing support for, than to like go somewhere where that's not the case. Now, sometimes these two things sometimes you have two equally awesome options and one of them has more name recognition, and then maybe that would be a good reason to go there. But I just worry about this a little bit. So I just, sort of give that caveat. I hear a lot of people giving advice that, like, you have to go to like really prestigious universities in order to have any chance at being a professor. And I just don't think that's true. I mean, it also depends on it also depends on like things in your field and what are considered good programs. I'm not telling you should go to a bad program. I'm just telling you that like sometimes the best programs and the best faculty are not at an Ivy League. And I say this as someone who's not in an Ivy League, right? So maybe I'm biased, but just just something to keep in mind. What are questions that can be asked in the first interview after submission of the PhD application? What questions do you have? Right? I don't know what questions you have. But like if you're looking for sort of default questions to ask a faculty member if you're talking to them. So I have a video about this where I probably have many more ideas than what I'm coming up with off the top of my head. But like, what kind of research are you excited about right now is a really good one. That's probably like one of my favorite questions. Questions about the program, of course, like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say without more context, right? What are some exciting things that students in this program are doing right now? What kind of internships do students in this program get? You can ask what's the funding model, etc. How to choose a PhD program. You're almost done with your master's, and most people with a PhD say don't do it. Okay, well, I mean, so I've got some videos that are like things you should consider for whether you want to get a PhD. I've got a video about like finding places to apply for a PhD that might be useful, and then I've got one because I don't know which one of these things you were asking about. And then I've got one that's like, you've been admitted and now you have to make a decision between multiple places. How do you decide? So lots of things to take into account in all of those things. If you're asking about one in particular, add another comment and I'll see if I can. But I also have those videos. I'm just not sure which one you're asking. Have been admitted to a school in the US and invited for a virtual recruitment session. Will you be evaluated for potential assistantships? Any advice? I mean, I don't really have more advice beyond the kinds of stuff I've already talked about. I've got a video about interviews and one about site visits that might be useful. If you're being evaluated for assistantships, if there's any way for you to sort of find out ahead of time what they're about, like, because if it's an assistantship, it's either teaching or research. And so like, is it specific funded grant projects? Like, do you know who the PIs are for those researches? Or if it's for teaching assistantships, then look at what the undergrad classes in the department are and see which ones you might be capable of teaching. A professor from a program you applied to emailed asking the program to give you an offer. Should you reply, and if so, how? Emailed you. He's I believe the correct. So yes, you should respond, and I believe the correct response is thank you and to express your enthusiasm. Congratulate. I mean, that sounds really good. I mean, I guess you don't know like for certain whether it'll end up that way, but I think an enthusiastic thank you would be the appropriate response. Talking a bit about funding, different types of funding and what you can expect. So just because I'm answering all these questions so briefly, and I'm going to answer it, but also I have a whole video about PhD funding. If you want to hear me talk about it for 20 minutes. So in the US, for funded PhD programs, typically the funding is a combination of research assistantships and teaching assistantships. And how much of each of those things is going to vary by program, by discipline, et cetera. Like, if you're in a humanities field, research assistantships are much less common. So it's often that you teach throughout your entire PhD and are a teaching assistant at the beginning and teaching your own classes at the end. In STEM fields, research assistantships are more common, and usually it's a combination of teaching or research. And typically these things that I'm describing are a tuition waiver and a stipend. And how much that stipend is going to vary a lot, different places, even different departments at the same university. but I would say like, I don't like on the low end, like the real low end would be like $20,000 and the real high end would be $30,000. And so it's really hard to say. But enough to live on, but not comfortably, to be frank. So yeah, I guess that's all. I guess that's all I can say for that question. What about applying to a Canadian university for a professor job? Yes, there are professors in Canada as well, and they have jobs you can apply to. Can you apply to be a professor after your PhD? So you're saying I'm getting a PhD in X country. Can I apply to be a professor in other countries? And the answer is yes, absolutely. People get yeah, totally. That happens all the time. Came to know that application deadlines for PhDs have already passed for many universities in the US. Can you still find an acceptance contacting professors? So, it's possible that some programs might be willing to have some wiggle room in their application deadlines. Many will not. And, you just have to know that that's the case. I mean, I guess I would say like contacting professors. So you need to be so if you're going to contact professors, be very clear that like you realize the application deadline has passed. You are, wanted to reach out to them anyway. And you might say like, I wanted to go ahead and reach out to you anyway, because I might consider applying for the next deadline. So I wanted to go ahead and reach out. Though if you think that it's possible for me to apply now, please let me know. So make it clear that you're not necessarily asking for an exception. But I guess like maybe it's like I think most of what you're going to get back from that is our deadline has passed. But some places have wiggle room, and if there's a particular faculty member who happens to be like looking for a student just like you, like it's possible that they could advocate for letting your application in late. So it's possible, but probably be prepared to and be clear that you know the deal. And maybe frame it like you might still consider applying for later. That's why you're reaching out. I mean, I think so anyway. Is there anything you can do to follow up after applying? For example, the people you're applying to work with. So have you already been in touch with them? Because if you already reached out before your application to like potential supervisors and had a conversation with them, and there's nothing new, like there's nothing new except you're just waiting, right? Like I don't know what you would say in a follow-up. Like if you emailed a particular faculty member and said, I'm actually not even sure what you would say. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can ask about status. If you ask about the status of your application, you should ask like the person who's coordinating applications or the director of the grad program or something, and not like an individual faculty member, because they're likely to not know. So you can do that, but like there should probably be a reason that you're following up. So as I was saying a bit earlier, like if someone emailed me, and I would be the person people would email, even though I'm a faculty member, we just don't have someone who runs this thing except for me. If someone emailed me and said, I would like to know, the status of my application and when I might get decisions, my response would be, your application is under review, and we will get decisions to you as soon as possible. And there just isn't any more information than that. Applied for a PhD in the UK, but no publications. What are your chances? So again, I can't answer any questions about what are anyone's chances for a PhD. All the questions like this that we've gotten during this particular stream, I have yet to see a single thing that would be a reason to definitely not get into a PhD. And I can't even imagine what that thing would be. I mean, I guess if someone was like, I can't imagine something that you would ask me where I would say that is a reason why you definitely will not get into a PhD program. I can't imagine what that would be. So I just can't answer these questions, unfortunately. What's my opinion about interdisciplinary studies? What can one stand to benefit from cross training? I mean, I think the answer to this is going to be different for different disciplines. I mean, information science is kind of a interdisciplinary discipline, so it's a little bit unusual in that way. So I mean, I always think that interdisciplinarity is great. But I think, in terms of like what that looks like for PhD training, I'm not really sure sort of how to answer this question, but there, maybe it's something you could get advice from someone in your field. Is it okay to mention in your statement of purpose, sorry, scrolled away, that you want to build in a career on industry and doing a PhD for the love of research? Sure. Yeah, that sounds like something good to mention in a statement of purpose. Applied to programs in the fall and waiting to hear back. Advice on how to manage feelings and emotions while waiting. In whatever ways you typically manage anxiety and that kind of emotion. That's going to be different for everyone. I give advice to try to avoid obsessing. And so, avoiding, for example, gradcafe and other places where people just spend all their time trying to figure out whether other people have heard back and making themselves more anxious. I don't see how that's helpful. But beyond trying as much as you can not to obsess, whatever way you best handle stress, and maybe talking to people in your life who are a good support system, I think is really important too. Missed UK general scholarships. Can you still find funding? I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know much about the UK system, so I can't answer that question. Because of coronavirus, you've thought about the option of distance learning. What do you think about this? If it's possible to do that you can't do that in my PhD program, but maybe some you can. And so you should look into whether that's possible. Can you be accepted into a PhD program while you're doing your master's? You're almost done. Yes, in fact, that's incredibly common. Because you're applying now for programs that are starting in fall 2022. And so if you're going to graduate with your master's degree this May, then this is when you would apply to start in the fall and not have a gap. So totally common. Do you think that GRE scores are still very important? 100% no. Sorry. I point you very strongly to the word I think. Do you think? I think that GRE scores are almost useless. Many of you have probably heard me rant about this before. I think they're not useful. I think that it's good for them to be optional, as opposed to not accepting them at all, because I do think that for some people, they might be helpful for their application. Maybe that is a strength that makes up for other weaknesses. However, if for the program it is optional and you do not have to submit GRE scores, then the absence of a GRE score is a non-signal. It doesn't mean it's like the same way that they don't know whether you like dogs or cats. It's a non-signal. And in that case, it's just not important. So, if a place is optional and you happen to have amazing GRE scores and you think it will make up for other weaknesses in your application, then totally submit them. But if you don't want to take it, there's lots of reasons why you might not want to take it, including it costs money, then don't take it. If it's not required by the programs that you're applying to, I mean. And I always feel like I should caveat what I'm talking about. Some people think GRE scores are very important, but I would say that if places are starting to drop them, that suggests that they also do not. So, contacted by faculty that you didn't mention in your SOP, should you say that you're not interested? Okay, well, are you not interested? I mean, if you're really not, well, okay, hold on. Let me think about this for a minute. Okay. So you applied to a program there is a particular advisor or advisors who you want to work with, but someone else contacted you. So again, there are different things that someone contact. It could, like, I don't know if people really do this, but it is possible that, like, instead of doing, you know, like formal interviews or whatever, they just have applicants who are on a short list, like, talk to different people, and they might not be a potential advisor. Okay, wait. Okay, I've thought about this for a second. I have an answer for you. You should not say I'm not interested. Okay. Yeah, don't do that. I mean, okay, assuming you want to potentially go to this program, that there would be zero benefit and a ton of risk to doing that because of a couple of reasons. One is they might not be asking to interview you because, like, they're now your only advising option. They might not even be an advising option. They might just be wanting to talk to you, in which case you saying no would look very bad and probably just put you out of the pool. It's also possible that this is a potential advising match for you, and why are you assuming that it's not? Like, what if they are doing work right now that is exactly what you want to do, and that's why they want to talk to you? Like, you don't know that they're a bad advising match because you don't necessarily know what they're working on or what they want to work on in the future. So, like, why take that risk? You know, it's what, like half an hour of your time or whatever. So yeah, I think, unless I'm missing a piece of the puzzle here, if a faculty member in a program that you want to go to says, I would like to talk to you, you talk to them. Planning to work as a research assistant during your gap year. Do research assistant jobs provide opportunities to be publication or presentations? Almost certain, probably / almost certainly, depending on the field. My hope is yes, for both of those things. But public, like, being in the middle of an author list for stuff. But this is a question to ask when you're deciding on a research assistantship or looking for them, and expressing to the PI that you are very interested in being involved in writing stuff up for publication, I think would be a wonderful thing to mention. Interviewed with a professor, and at the end he said should hear next week from another professor because he thinks he's a better fit for you, good or bad. Okay, neutral / good. Yeah, neutral / good. and common, totally common. Applied to Brown and they didn't send you an interview invitation but haven't gotten a rejection. Is it a silent rejection? So you applied to Brown, but you applied somewhere and you haven't heard anything yet. That is neutral. That means there's not a decision yet. If the issue is, like, I've been hanging out on gradcafe and I know that other people got invitations to something, you know, that's obviously and also, guys, seriously, don't do this. I just feel like it's just going to make everyone so anxious, because what's the benefit of knowing that? So, you know, it's possible that, like, if you know for a fact that they've already sent out invitations, that's like a bad sign, but it's not a rejection until it's a rejection. Seriously, not a rejection until it's a rejection. Also, wait lists are a thing that exist. Can you explain the difference between a fellowship position and an individual PhD? Oh, sorry, I missed one. I'll come back to this one. If you apply in December 2022, when can you expect to get accepted and travel to the US start classes? Well, so when you apply, it'll be for a particular starting. So probably if you're applying in December 2022, that is for positions that start in fall of 2023. The difference between a fellowship position and an individual PhD. I'm afraid I don't understand this question. If you mean, like, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but outside the US, in particular in the UK and some other countries in Europe, there are very often, like, specific funded PhD positions. Like, you're applying for this almost like you're applying for a job. That's less common in the US. So that might be the difference. But I also just might not quite know what you're talking about. In the PhD interviews, are specialized questions asked? I'm not sure what you mean by specialized questions, but if you mean like, are they going to ask me like technical questions about my field? I'm afraid I don't know about that. I don't personally have any experience with that type of formal PhD interview, and so I can't really speak to that. Yeah, if anyone wants to answer other people's questions in the chat, please feel free. You're welcome to talk to each other. I'm not gatekeeping the conversation. Is it a good idea to trademark and file a design patent for ideas associated to your proposal before applying to your PhD? I mean, my initial reaction to this is, why would you do that? And is it possible, like, kind of why would you do that? And a little bit like, is your idea really that far along? So as someone who happens to, outside the context of this conversation, be a expert on intellectual property, like trademark, probably not. Like what are you trademarking? Like, are you starting a business? Are you patent? I mean, is it like, it's something really that far along that you can patent it? In which case, like, sure, I guess. But I wouldn't say that like you should be doing that because you're applying for a PhD. So I guess my answer to this question is those two things. Should I trademark something? Should I patent something? Is a question that seems separate from starting a PhD. What is the difference between a statement of academic intent and a statement of research? If you are applying to programs outside the US, and in particular in the UK, sometimes they require explicit research proposals as part of an application. I do not know what those look like, but maybe that's what you mean. In which case, I just don't know the answer to this. Have PhD interviews coming up. Is there anything you should avoid saying or doing in an interview to avoid rejection? Yeah. Don't be a, like, I mean, this is hard to answer, right? Because like, one would think that what I'm about to say, again, would go without saying. But don't be a jerk to anyone. Like, don't be a jerk to other students. Don't be a jerk to other applicants. Like, not just faculty are not the only ones you have to impress if it's an interview, or at least not make them think bad of you. So, like, again, don't be rude to the admin who's booking your flights. And it just be yourself, and be polite and interested and enthusiastic. And beyond that, it's kind of hard to say. What types of questions the committee asks students in an online interview? Why do you want to get a PhD? What kind of research do you want to do? Or the big ones. And I have a whole video about this if you want more. Those are like the most important, though, off the top of my head. And also, do you have any questions about the program sometimes? Is it all right to drop an email to interested potential advisors that you've applied and your application is under review? I mean, I don't know that like there's a ton of benefit to it, but if you've already been in contact with them and you have an email chain and you want to just reply to the last email and say, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks to this conversation, I did decide to apply to the program, and my understanding is, I think that's fine. I mean, I don't know how much it helps because like your application's under review anyway, but I think sending that kind of email is perfectly fine. Interviewers grilled you hard and you answered every question wrong. Oh, wait. Oh, and it scrolled away. Sorry. It's likely someone won't reject you outright. Do you need approval from each interviewer from acceptance? I do not know the answer to that. My guess is that the way that admissions is decided is totally different in different departments. That wouldn't be how it worked in our department, but I seriously I'm afraid I don't know. Interviewed by a professor and he encouraged you to apply. Should you apply to other universities also? Yes. Sorry, that was very adamant. Yes, you should. Unless like if he told you if you apply, you absolutely will be accepted. That's a different thing. But if it's just someone told you that you should apply, you should not assume that will mean an acceptance. And it's always good to apply to some other places because there are lots of reasons you might be admitted that have nothing to do with how awesome you are. Um, and there also might be other universities that are better. So you might as well, keeping in mind your capacity with application fees and this sort of thing. But unless someone told you that you absolutely will be admitted, there is a chance that you will not be. Is MS running? Ooh, I don't know if maybe this is a typo. The question, this is from Tasnia, says, can you tell me if MS running program worthy of PhD application? Maybe it's a typo, but I don't understand that question. Sorry, you can ask again if you like. Does it matter to reach out to professors using institutional emails rather than Gmail? Nope, I can't see why that would matter. I don't even think I would notice. Is there a disadvantage in not mentioning the name of interested faculties in the statement of purpose if the main area of interest is mentioned? I mean, maybe. Again, I think there are slightly different norms in different disciplines, and in some, especially like in humanities disciplines, where your admission is not tied particularly closely to an advisor. Like it's totally normal to not mention specific advisors. So it's a disciplinary difference. And if you are applying in a discipline where it's kind of expected that you mention people, if you still did a good job talking about your research interests such that they can do that mapping for you, so whoever's reading it, then it could still be fine. PhD interview next week with a potential advisor and a PhD student. What would the PhD student be looking for in the interview? Probably whether you seem like a cool person to hang. I mean, the same, sort of the same kinds of things that the advisor would be looking for, I guess. But it's actually very possible that the reason the PhD student is there isn't as much to interview you as to answer questions potentially. When we do like open house kind of stuff, we'll ask the PhD student, the current students, for their thoughts on applicants. I can't think I can't think of a time though when like the students like told us not to admit. Like I don't think that's ever happened. But sometimes they say really nice things about people, which lots of things go into an application, and we're not letting the PhD students make application decisions, but we care what they think. And they also just might learn things that are, oh my gosh, this person really, really wants to come here. It's their like top choice, even though they've gotten into all these other amazing places. Stuff like that can be kind of nice to know. Reached out to a professor from the university you applied to, but you didn't receive a response. You mentioned their name. It's not. I don't totally understand the question, but I think you're saying you reached out to a faculty member, they didn't respond, but you still mentioned their name in your statement of purpose. Is that okay? Yes, that is totally fine. Lots of reasons they might not have answered that don't mean anything about the strength of your potential application. How do you structure your answer regarding your research interests in an interview? I don't know. I like my thought is like, tell them about your research interests. It's structure. I don't know. I guess I can't think of a particular structure. I guess if this is part of the story and you wanted to think about narrative, you could tell them how your existing experience led you to be interested in X now, and then talk about how you could do X very well at this particular place. If I had to think about a potential narrative, but I think there's lots of different ways you could do it. Low GRE scores, good academics. Is there a chance? Yeah, I'm so again, I can't tell anyone anything about their chances. I have yet to see anyone in these comments mention anything that I think suggests they could not get into a PhD program. And but you're worried about GRE scores in particular. So look and see whether the programs you're applying to require GRE scores, because a ton of programs don't require them even anymore. But I can also tell you it's entirely possible that wherever you apply, even if they require them, there's probably some crotchety person on the faculty like me who refuses to look at GRE scores. Oh wait, that's not fair. I don't refuse to look at them. I look at them, but I don't consider low ones to be a bad thing. What proportion of applicants are waitlisted? Unfortunately, no way to know that. My guess is that that's highly variable from program to program. Is there an option to start the PhD in spring? Maybe in some places. I think it's uncommon, but maybe in some places. Oh, so back to the trademark patent question. So an attorney mentions that you should talk to tech transfer, and if you are a current PhD student, that would be also as an IP expert, like that's the advice I would give you. If you're a PhD student and you're doing research, like talk to the tech transfer office. Or if you're accepted into a PhD program and you're already doing something that you think could be patented or whatever, you could also then talk to the tech transfer office. I just wasn't sure what patenting had to do with like doing it before you get a PhD. Are you worried that like if you start a PhD and you've already done something, they're going to steal it or like it becomes theirs? I mean, if that's a concern, then like, yeah, before you decide, like before you enter a program, like when you're trying to decide where to go, you can certainly ask about policies around that. Having a low GPA in undergraduate but high GPA in graduate. I always think, I mean, again, low GPA is not a deal breaker, but also like I tend to think that an upward trajectory is a nice thing in admissions. Difference between a statement of intent and statement of research. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't know. I've not heard that term before. But my guess is that a statement of intent is probably very similar to a statement of purpose, in which case my video about that might be useful. Would asking for a Zoom discussion to a PI through mail after application submission look good, and is it helpful? Never demand a meeting with a prospective advisor. It just, you can leave open the option for that, but like, but there's only so many hours in the day and lots of people applying, and there might not even be a good reason to have a conversation like that, if your application is under review. And so, if you're reaching out to a prospective advisor, well, and in my video about reaching out to potential advisors, I have a thing where I give a sort of suggestion for how you might word an email that leaves open the potential for a meeting without demanding one. Yeah, so a sort of related question to this is like, you've already submitted your application. Is there any point now in reaching out to potential advisors? You can. I might like. I don't think it's as useful for you at this point, and it might be slightly less likely that you get a response, or the response might just be, "Thank you for letting me know that you applied. Your application is under review." I mean, I think as long as you're polite, etc., sending these kinds of emails won't hurt anything. It's just, probably slightly less helpful for you now. And again, maybe norms are different in different disciplines, so maybe ask someone else. Yeah, with the tech transfer thing, like when you develop something in a PhD program and it has potential for a startup, yes, different universities have different policies around this kind of thing, and the tech transfer office is who would know. Also, potentially like the department would know. So if you're admitted into a program and you want to know about this, then they could probably answer it for you, or like send you to the right person to ask. Apply to an integrated PhD program, got a rejection saying you're not being considered, but can apply to the department directly. What should you do? Well, if you want to go there and you would also like to be in the program from the direct department, then you should apply. I think I might not be understanding your question, but I think the answer is if you want to apply, you should apply. Can you get PhD admissions if your master's study took a long time for different reasons? Yes. I mean, so again, same sort of response to these sorts of questions, which is like, that is not a reason that you would not be admitted into a PhD program. How open are programs to middle-aged candidates who've been doing research outside of academia? Very open. I mean, I think very open. I think it doesn't matter. I think I've given this statistic before. So there have been multiple PhD students in my program that are over 50. So I mean, I'm not going to pretend that like you're not going to find any ageism anywhere ever. But I can certainly tell you that there are lots of people who are middle-aged and pursue PhDs. Interview next week, don't have any publications, but are enthusiastic. Should you describe your research how do you describe your research interests without being too vague? So first of all, again, you don't have to have publications. I think expressing your enthusiasm is awesome. And how to do it about like, again, vague. I guess I do have a piece of advice for this. So you can describe your research as kind of like a, like a triangle. Like there's the vague stuff, and then you can get more specific. But a good idea might be to use like, for example, I am interested broadly in X. Some example things that I could see myself doing in X are A, B, and C. Tips for writing a research proposal. If you mean the formal research proposals that are part of PhD applications and that are most common in countries outside the US, I'm afraid I just don't know anything about those. If nothing is mentioned in the admission process about interviews, will they still take an interview as around? Possibly. I don't know that, like, for example, if you looked on our website about stuff related to admissions, it wouldn't say anything about interviews. So I don't necessarily think that you would know. And there's one more question. So this is an excellent place for me to wrap up. Okay, two more questions. One more just came up. Are blogs or articles different in different websites considered publications? So when you say considered as publications for a PhD program, you're suggesting like a I have to have a publication for it to count to do X, Y, or Z to my application, and that's not a thing. So it doesn't matter if something counts as a publication; it just is what it is. Right. So if you've written blog posts and articles, et cetera, that's cool. And if it's something like, like saying on your CV or whatever that you have a blog or mentioning, totally cool. Is research experience outside of academia count? So same sort of thing. So this question, like counting, like what counts? There's things don't count or not count because there's not a checklist. There's not like an algorithm that's like, this person has this many publications and did they do that's not how it works. So it is what it is, and research experience is research experience. How credible are online PhD programs? I don't really know the answer. So online means a lot of different things. There are some PhD programs that are distance learning that I think are probably fine, and there's some that I think are probably total scams. Is there a chance to get a fully funded PhD offer from top business schools? With so again, I just can't answer this question. Anything about your particular stats, whatever, except to tell you that you don't have to have experience or publications in order to be accepted into a PhD program. Priority deadline is over. Can you still talk to the professor and apply before the normal end date? If you haven't missed the deadline, then you should totally apply. Yeah, deadlines are there for a reason. And if you haven't missed the deadline, then you can still apply. Negative impact on application if a person has good teaching experience. Is there a negative impact on an application if you... Did you word this right, or did you mean if you don't have teaching experience? Okay, I'll answer the question as asked, which is, does teaching experience make your application worse? And I cannot even imagine any reason why that would possibly be true. So I guess my answer is no. When talking about previous research, did you include technical details or focus on how it connects to PI's research that you want to do in the future? I think this depends a little bit on what kinds of questions they're asking and how long like if someone says, tell me about your research, and you have a 20-minute discussion and you spend 15 minutes like describing some minute technical detail of your research, is probably not the best use of your time. All right, I think that's it. Yay. Well, good luck to everyone. I hope, can you get funding even after the priority deadline is over? I have no idea. That's a question that you would have to ask them specifically. So if anyone has more questions, or, if if someone's watching this later and you just sat through this whole thing, kudos. Please feel free to ask questions so I do really need to go. So if you've just asked a question, please put it in the chat on this video once it posts in like 5 minutes, and I will answer in the chat on YouTube. And thanks everyone, and most of all, good luck. Good luck to everyone. And I'll do another live stream probably next month. All right, bye everyone.